Let's talk about dating after prison, specifically dating after 19 years in prison. Because all those years, what I thought about more than anything else was women. I mean, I thought about food and nature and work and family, but I thought about women. And a lot of people talk about the sex part, and that was a big part of it. And there was a lot of fantasy and a lot of desire, and oh my God, it's going to like somehow fill this void inside of me, which of course no single thing is ever going to do. But I also thought about the other parts of intimacy. I thought about cooking together in the kitchen, or dancing, or sitting on the couch and watching a movie, or laying in bed together and feeling their skin against mine. Those are the things that kind of sustained me in a way, knowing that they would be in the future, but also in some ways made prison so much more painful. So dating after prison has a lot of complications because, for example, do I tell somebody about my past immediately? Like, when do I tell them? Or I'm in a unique situation where my entire life is out on the internet, where I went to a party last night and somebody walked up and said, "Hey, I love your stuff on social media." I've done that in LA and in Las Vegas and in New York. I've had people stop me on the street. So a lot of people, and including people who have reached out to date or be romantic, have reached out through social media knowing everything about my life. And this is kind of neat because, hey, I don't have to explain it, I don't have to worry about it. But it's also weird because I've sat across the table from someone who will reference a video I made a year ago or 2 years ago and refer to something in my childhood that I don't even remember talking about. And yet I know absolutely nothing about them. Or it's the other situation where you meet somebody and yet you just tell them the first thing, like, "Hey, by the way, I just got out of prison, like, you want to go out for coffee?" Or do you wait? Do you wait and develop a relationship and then wonder if they're going to feel betrayed? And all this comes from a number of things because growing up, I dated or I was interested in women very young. Like in kindergarten, I had crushes. I had a crush on a girl from kindergarten to second grade, and then a different girl from third grade to fifth grade. Like from the beginning, I knew that I liked girls. Also was incredibly insecure because part of that and part of some other things that happened, I didn't feel like I was allowed to like what I thought I wanted or what I wanted or the type of things or the type of woman. And I grew into this place where I just accepted whatever affection I got. So if a woman liked me, well, I was going to date her. Like that's what it was. It wasn't about whether I liked her or not. It was about whether I got the validation of someone liking me. It's obviously incredibly problematic and not helpful. And I had some incredible little brief teenage relationships in high school, and some of those women have gone on to live amazing lives and prove themselves to be exactly who they were. But also, there were a lot of times where I wasn't really happy, and that continued while I was in prison, because I had relationships while I was in prison. So most of the women that reached out while I was inside were not very healthy or coming from a very good place, but they were generally pretty affectionate or pretty sweet or pretty like to dirty talk or, have phone sex, which again, when I felt like there was this void that something would fill, that was really appealing. And I learned a lot from those relationships. I learned what I liked and what I didn't like. I explored, I got better at communicating. But I also had some trauma, just like I had some trauma in childhood because they weren't the healthiest and they didn't always have the best boundaries and I didn't yet know how to do a lot of that. Then the last relationship I had while I was in prison actually turned into the first relationship I had in the wider world. And Courtney was very different than everybody else because unlike women who had specifically sought out a relationship with someone in prison, ours developed organically. She was a reporter for a local TV station and she'd reached out for a story regarding the abolition of parole in Virginia and the effect. And so she interviewed me, but she only interviewed me by a phone. We did this phone interview and I was like, wow, she's really amazing. And we continued this professional relationship for a year and a half, where we would kind of chat, and I would call her and say, "Hey, they just strip searched a kid. I figure this is a good lead for you," or "Hey, so and so just had this terrible thing," or "They're being denied medical care," or "We had a scabies outbreak, but the officers are interacting with people in both pods," or whatever. So she would do these stories, and that was really validating because it felt like, hey, somebody actually cares enough to talk about our experience. Somebody actually cares enough to share with the wider world what's going on behind these closed doors and behind these fences that are often built to keep people out rather than just to keep people in. And eventually that turned into a friendship. She had a personal event happen in her life and basically said, "Hey, I'd love to get your advice, but like there's a hard line here. Like if you become my friend, I can never report on you again. This is an ethical thing." And I said, "Look, there are a lot of reporters in the world. I can always find somebody to carry the news. Like you're an amazing person. I want to be your friend." And then that friendship continued for a fairly long period of time where we developed and we shared stories and we laughed, and she really helped me. For the last 10 months I was inside, I was sent to a dormitory. And so I went from having a single cell and a really good established routine, even during COVID, which was terrible, to being locked in a room with 81 other people and just rows of open sinks and rows of open toilets and rows of open showers. And just, it was the hardest time I'd ever done. And she helped me put it into perspective where I could kind of reclaim what I wanted and what I needed and help me get to a better place. In the beginning of 2021, we started talking because yet another crisis had happened in her life, and we shared, and what was a friendship became a lot more. And it's so funny because when we were talking as friends, I remember her saying, "I'm fascinated by this like prison wife thing. Like, how do people fall in love? I don't get it. Like, you're not having sex, like you're not cooking dinner together, you're not watching TV together. Like, how does it become a romance or a relationship rather than just a friend?" And after less than a month of us talking every day, she said, hey, remember how I asked that question? Like, yeah, I get it now. I see how it's more. And that romance continued for the next 6 months until on August 16th of 2021, with an hour and a half's notice, I was released 10 years before the end of my sentence after being granted a conditional pardon by the governor. So all of a sudden, our relationship went from by phone, because we had never met in person. All of our interaction, all of our communication had been by letter, by phone, or briefly by video visit. And so there she was standing in front of me. She was a lot shorter than I realized. And we were able to start this relationship in 3D. And there were a lot of challenges to that, because one of the things she said, this was maybe a month or two after I got out, she said, Jesse, I would never want you to go back, but I'm having to mourn the loss of what we had, of this deep communication, of talking for hours every day, of feeling like, we just bond, because out here in the world, we're busy and we don't talk as much. And yeah, we do these other things. We get to be physically intimate, we get to share, but we don't have what we had. And she said, there's something about that I miss. So there's a big transition, especially for people who go from relationships inside to relationships outside. And Courtney and I were together for about 15 months, from August of 21 until November of 22. And when that relationship ended, a lot of people said that I was a jerk, or said that I was a failure, or said that she was a failure, or she had people reaching out to tell that I was a narcissist, and all this idea based in that if a relationship ends, it was a failure. That if we don't end up with that person forever, it was a failure. And I think that's flawed thinking, because 99% of the relationships we find are not going to be forever relationships. But if we approach them in a healthy way, they can be learning relationships. We will learn something of value about ourselves, or about another person, about what we want, or about how we want to interact, and then we can carry that to our next relationship. But when everybody says, oh no, everyone has to last forever, well, again, we're kind of missing the point. When that ended, I had to figure out what I wanted. And so I said 2023 was going to be a year of saying yes to everything. I was going to say yes to every date, to every business opportunity, to every interview, to every bizarre experience. And I wasn't going to get into a relationship, because I wanted to, kind of see the world. And there was an element of wanting to kind of play the field and make up for lost time and have experiences. But there was also the hope of getting to know myself better by having all these experiences and not jumping into a relationship because it feels comfortable or easy. That being said, I managed to fall into 2 different relationships that year. And both of those I realized it's kind of back to that childhood thing, where if somebody really liked me enough, I ended up being like, well, I guess we're supposed to be together because they like me so much. And both of these women were absolutely exceptional. This was not like, oh, they were just like, it's some sad case. They were really exceptional women. And one of them ended because she moved away. Like, we weren't supposed to be in a relationship in the beginning because she was moving away, and we knew that. And the other one ended because I realized that I had not been able to set boundaries and communicate. And that had been one of my issues as a kid. That had been one of my issues with relationships in prison. And it's so strange, because in prison with other guys, it's really easy to be like, yo, back the F up. Like, don't do this. But in intimate relationships, it feels like all those skills kind of go out the window, and I just kind of turn to mush, and I just put myself in really compromising situations. And so when I go to set those boundaries, as I work on these new skills that I'm developing, I realize that's not comfortable, and I don't always do it well. And sometimes I overact. And it was a situation where, we just both kind of triggered each other, and I realized like, oh, cool, I've got to step back, because I still have stuff I need to figure out. And that's really where I'm at. I've made a lot of progress in therapy in the last year. I feel like a better version of myself. I feel like I know myself better. I feel more confident. I feel more capable. But I realize I still have a long way to go. So as I explore that, I recognize that I'm going to have to continue to get to know myself. So I don't know what I want. Somebody made a really healthy suggestion, like, you need to step away from romance and sex, because you really need to get yourself together in the world and then reach out. And that's great advice, but after 19 years of being forced to do that, I don't want to give up that opportunity. I don't want to go without intimacy. I don't want to go without connection. But at the same time, when I go into relationships or I go into dates, being honest and say, hey, I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know what I'm ready for. Like, this is where I'm at. Generally, if I find somebody really healthy, they either say, hey, cool, that's fine with me, let's explore it, or hey, that's not what I'm looking for, and they go. And that's really where I have to recognize that it's not all on me. But it's also not all on the other person. I can't blame them for something. I have to take responsibility for my half and recognize where my boundaries are. Whatever the other person does, whatever they want, whatever they need, whatever their thoughts or actions are, I'm the one who has to set boundaries and say, okay, cool, we can explore this, or oh, hey, this isn't okay with me, or let's talk about this, or hey, I don't feel comfortable talking about this. All that's work that I have to do. And again, one of the things that I have to figure out is, how do I talk about my past? How do I expose this? Because to the women who know me from online, who reach out, they know everything about me. To the women who don't, well, do I tell them on the first date? Do I lead with that? Like, hey, spent 19 years in prison, you want to get coffee? I don't know. When I think about the people that I've met and the good experiences I've had, I don't know where to set that line. But what I do know is that I've met some amazing people. And that my life is significantly richer after this year of saying yes. And even though this 2024 is going to be a year of saying no and kind of paring back the things in my life to really focus on what I want to focus on, I also recognize that I'm not shutting my life down to new or novel experiences. I do. I still meet people and talk to people and have open, ideas and explore ideas. And I'm really recognizing what brings value in my life. And that meant there have been some relationships, like even friendships that I've ended or I've walked away from. And that has been really important because when I look at where the healthy or the good in my life is, where both I am able to give healthy and good and also where I receive healthy and good, those aren't all the relationships. But I always feel this sense of obligation. It's one of the reasons I've dated people that I didn't really want to date. Because, oh, well, they like me, or, oh, we share a history, or, oh, well, they're so sweet, or, oh, they're so thoughtful. Like, I have to set those boundaries. I have to be like, hey, this isn't life-giving. Like, this isn't good for me. It's not good for you. Like, I don't want to be a part of this process. And I struggle with that. I really don't know how to set all those boundaries, but that's the exciting thing, is that I'm in a place to learn. I'm in a place to learn what I like and what I do well and what I don't do well. And one of the things, even if I don't lead with my experience in prison, because again, when I'm out in the world, like, I don't talk about that first. I talk about what I'm reading or what I'm eating or what I'm excited about or what I'm doing at the gym. I do think it's important to lead with the things we don't know well. So I will tell people, and sometimes I've met a narcissist or two who's like used this and tried to manipulate it, but I'll tell people, hey, this is where I'm at, and this is really what I'm struggling with. Like, this is really what I'm working on, and I can usually tell by somebody's response whether they're the kind of person who is going to be a little crazy and try to manipulate that, or whether they're really doing that kind of soul-searching work themselves and be like, yeah, either I relate to that, or no, that's not my issue, but this is my issue. Like, oh, that's really neat. Let's talk about it. It tells me a lot about a person, because I think I actually went to an event last night that was all about how we interact with people and the whole idea of networking and the whole idea of leadership. And so many people lead with, hey, this is what I do, and I'm so proud of myself. Man, I don't find a lot of value in that. Like, I don't really care if somebody's really, like, tell me about who you are as a person. Tell me your story. Tell me what you struggle with. Like, tell me where you're at right now, because, looking at all the accolades on the wall is great. Like, congratulations, it's really good for you. But that's not a good story. That's not a good interaction. And what I'm looking for more than anything else is authentic people. And that's why romantic or platonic or professional or academic, when I find those people, those are the relationships that I really value. And those are the interactions that really kind of like buoy me and keep me going. And that's why as I go through life, I try to meet those people. I try to interact with those people. And it's so funny because I was an introvert for most of my life. I had to like be by myself and withdraw, and now I'm much more extroverted, but I do still have to recharge because I can go into a room and I can be on, but there's also a point at the end of the night where I'm just exhausted and I need to go back and crash. But I think it's important to go in and explore and meet people and ask questions, because those are where those incredible relationships and interactions come from. So whether it's a professional meeting or whether it's a social event, I want to meet people. I want to have conversations. I want to explore, and I want to see what comes out of it, because that's how we meet the people in our lives that really give us value. And it's also how we meet the people in our lives that we realize we need to be better about boundaries with. But it's been an experience, and I'm really grateful for all that I'm experiencing. And even though I haven't figured out the whole dating after 19 years in prison thing, I do feel like I've learned a lot, and I do feel like I'm excited for the next year to come.